A single sharp beep. That's all it took to shatter the fragile peace of JFK's Terminal 4. For most, it's a minor annoyance. For Dr. Elias Vance, a black man in a simple grey hoodie holding a first-class ticket, that beep was the start of a nightmare. The gate agent, a woman with tired eyes and a tight smile, saw a problem, not a passenger. She blocked his path, his dignity, his journey, but she had no idea who she was blocking. In a few moments, he would make one quiet phone call, and that one call wouldn't just change her career. It would bring a 200-ton Boeing 777 and an entire international airline to its knees. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a unique kind of organized chaos. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements in a dozen languages, and the palpable anxiety of thousands of people trying to get from one point on the globe to another. For Dr. Elias Vance, it was just background noise. Seated near Gate C26, he was an island of calm in the swirling current of travelers. He wore a plain, charcoal grey designer hoodie, comfortable jeans, and a pair of pristine white sneakers that probably cost more than most people's entire outfits. On his wrist was a sleek, understated watch, its dark face hiding a complex mechanism. A perfect metaphor for the man himself. He wasn't flashy, but to a discerning eye, every item he wore spoke of quiet success and an appreciation for quality. At 42, his face was clean-shaven, and his short-cropped hair was flecked with the first hints of silver at the temples. He had his noise-cancelling headphones on, listening not to music, but to a dense audiobook on quantum computing. He was flying to London for a final integration summit, the culmination of 3 years of his life's work. His ticket, nestled in his passport, was for Seat 2A in Global Air's Polaris First Class. It was a necessity, not a luxury. The 7-hour flight was his last window to review complex schematics and prepare for a presentation that would affect the future of transatlantic aviation. He needed the space, the quiet, and the ability to work uninterrupted. The gate area was a microcosm of society. A young family wrangled 2 hyperactive children, their laughter occasionally piercing through the din. A group of students in matching university sweatshirts were excitedly taking selfies. Businessmen in wrinkled suits stared intently at their laptops, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of spreadsheets. And then there was Brenda Jenkins. Brenda was the lead gate agent for Global Air Flight 101 to London Heathrow. At 48, she had worked for the airline for 22 years, and the enthusiasm she once had was long gone, replaced by a hardened, cynical efficiency. She saw passengers not as people, but as a series of potential problems: oversized bags, expired passports, or fraudulent tickets. Her face was set in a permanent mask of strained politeness, but her eyes darted around, constantly scanning, judging. She had been passed over for a station manager promotion twice, and the bitterness had settled deep in her bones. She clung to the small sphere of authority she commanded at the boarding gate, like a queen ruling a tiny, turbulent kingdom. She made a pre-boarding announcement in a monotone voice that brooked no argument. We will now begin pre-boarding for Global Air Flight 101 to London. We invite our active duty military personnel and anyone needing special assistance to approach the gate at this time. A few people shuffled forward. Elias waited patiently. He wasn't one to crowd the gate. He preferred to be the last one on, avoiding the crush of people stuffing bags into overhead bins. We will now welcome our Polaris First Class and Business Class passengers to board. This was his cue. Elias took off his headphones, tucked his tablet into his leather carry-on, and stood up, stretching his long legs. He walked towards the podium where Brenda Jenkins stood, her colleague, a younger man named Leo, scanning passports with a forced, customer service smile. Elias handed his passport and boarding pass to Brenda. She took it without making eye contact, her attention on the computer screen. She scanned the barcode. Instead of the cheerful chime of approval, the scanner emitted a sharp, dissonant beep. A red light flashed on her console. Brenda's eyes finally lifted from the screen and settled on Elias. They traveled from his expensive but casual sneakers up to his hoodie, and finally to his face. A flicker of something, suspicion, confirmation, something, crossed her features. She looked back at the screen, then at his passport photo, then back at him. "There seems to be a problem with your ticket, sir," she said, her voice loud enough for the people behind him to hear. Elias remained calm. This happened sometimes. A computer glitch, a ticketing error. "Oh? I confirmed my seat just this morning. It should be fine." "The system has flagged it," Brenda said, her tone becoming firmer, more official. She tapped a few keys, the clacking of the plastic unnecessarily loud in the suddenly quiet space around the podium. The people in line behind Elias were beginning to stir, their impatience growing. "Could you please step to the side, sir?" Brenda gestured dismissively to an empty spot against the wall. "I need to assist the other passengers." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Elias felt the familiar, unwelcome heat of a dozen pairs of eyes on him. He was no longer a passenger. He was a problem, a spectacle. He gave a slight nod and moved aside, his composure a steel shield. He had a feeling this wasn't about a computer glitch at all. Elias stood against the wall, a model of patience, as the line of first and business class passengers snaked past him. He watched Brenda Jenkins work. She greeted a portly man in a pinstripe suit with a deferential smile. She shared a brief, friendly laugh with a well-dressed woman who was clearly a frequent flyer. With every passenger she approved, she cast a sideways glance at Elias, her expression hardening just a little more each time. It was a performance, and he was the unwilling centerpiece. The younger agent, Leo, looked over at Elias with an apologetic shrug, but he was too busy and too junior to intervene. He was focused on getting people on the plane. Brenda was the one in charge. After the priority passengers were on board and the main cabin boarding had begun, Brenda finally turned her full attention back to Elias. She walked over, not with his passport, but with a clipboard and a posture of interrogation. "All right, Mr. Vance," she began, mispronouncing his name as Vance. "I need to ask you a few questions." "It's Vance," he corrected her, his voice even and low. "And of course, ask what you need to." "This is a first-class ticket. It's quite expensive," she stated, as if he weren't aware. "Can you tell me how you purchased it?" The question hung in the air, thick with insinuation. He wasn't being asked about a technical issue. He was being audited. "I purchased it through my company's corporate travel portal," Elias replied, keeping his cool. "With the company credit card, as I always do." "And what company is that?" Brenda's pen was poised over her clipboard. "Ethereal Avionics." Brenda's face was blank. The name meant nothing to her. "Uh-huh. And what's your position there?" "I'm a senior partner and lead systems architect." She scribbled a note, her skepticism palpable. "An architect, I see. And you have a business card?" Elias blinked slowly. "I do. But my wallet is in my bag, which I'd prefer not to open in the middle of the terminal. My identity is confirmed by my passport. Is there an issue with the passport?" "We have to be thorough, sir," she said, the sir dripping with condescension. "There's been a rise in credit card fraud, especially for premium class tickets." The accusation was now clear, thinly veiled behind the veneer of procedure. He was a black man in a hoodie, and in her eyes, he didn't fit the profile of a legitimate first-class passenger. "Ms. Jenkins," Elias said, his voice dropping slightly, gaining a new edge of precision. My name is Dr. Elias Vance. My passport is a valid, government-issued document. My global entry and TSA pre-check are all in order, which I'm sure your system shows. The ticket was purchased weeks ago. If there was a fraud alert, it would have been flagged long before I arrived at this gate. So, could you please tell me the real reason my ticket was flagged? His use of her name and his calm, logical dismantling of her excuse seemed to fluster her for a second. She glanced at her screen, then back at him. Her face tightened. She was losing control, and she didn't like it. The system flagged it for a random security verification, sir. And frankly, your attitude is not helping your case. An older white man in a worn baseball cap, standing in the Zone 4 line, audibly scoffed. Just do what she says, pal. Some people are always looking for a problem. Elias ignored him, his focus entirely on Brenda. He could see the power trip in full swing. She felt challenged, and now she was digging in her heels. The initial suspicion had curdled into outright hostility. My attitude? Elias asked, a single eyebrow raised. My attitude has been one of cooperation. Yours, on the other hand, has been accusatory from the moment your scanner beeped. You haven't asked me a single question related to a technical error. You have questioned my finances and my profession. That's not a security verification. That's a personal audit. Brenda's face flushed a deep red. She was being cornered, her flimsy pretext exposed. She took a deep breath, puffing out her chest. She was doubling down. Look, I don't have time for this, she snapped. The final boarding call is in 5 minutes. If you can't provide sufficient verification... Sufficient verification of what, exactly? Elias interrupted, his voice still calm but now carrying a weight that made even the disgruntled man in the baseball cap fall silent. You have my passport. You have my ticket. You have my confirmation number. What more do you require? My university transcripts? My tax returns? The sarcasm was subtle, but it landed like a hammer blow. Brenda felt her authority slipping away in front of a crowd of onlookers. She had 2 choices: back down and admit she was wrong, or escalate to a point of no return. For a woman who felt the world had consistently dealt her a bad hand, backing down was not an option. Brenda Jenkins drew herself up to her full height. The name tag on her blazer read Customer Service Professional, a title that was becoming more ironic by the second. She looked at Dr. Elias Vance, at his calm, unwavering gaze, and saw not a man being wronged, but an obstacle to her authority. In her mind, he was the embodiment of every entitled, difficult passenger she'd ever had to deal with. The fact that he was calmly dismantling her every justification made it worse. Sir, I am the lead agent for this flight, she announced, her voice resonating with a false sense of finality. My primary responsibility is the safety and security of this aircraft. I determine who is fit to fly. Elias waited. He knew what was coming. He'd seen this script play out before, though never with stakes this high. And based on this situation, the inconsistencies with your ticket and your uncooperative demeanor, she continued, her voice rising, I am not comfortable allowing you to board this aircraft. It's a security risk. The words fell into the air and hung there, heavy and toxic. The excuse was so flimsy, so transparently false, that it was almost absurd. Inconsistencies that she couldn't name. Uncooperative demeanor from a man who hadn't raised his voice once. It was a complete fabrication, a narrative she constructed to justify an action born of pure prejudice. The surrounding passengers reacted with a mixture of shock and awkward silence. The young agent, Leo, looked at Brenda with wide, disbelieving eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but a sharp, cutting glare from Brenda snapped it shut. This was her show. Dr. Vance did not react as she expected. There was no shouting, no indignant rage, no demand to see her manager. At least not yet. Instead, a profound quiet settled over him. He seemed to absorb the blow, process it, and transform it not into anger, but into a chilling, razor-sharp focus. He looked directly into Brenda Jenkins's eyes. His voice, when he finally spoke, was devoid of any emotion, except a kind of weary disappointment. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, his tone soft but carrying incredible weight. "I'm going to give you one final opportunity to reconsider your decision. I want you to understand the full scope of what you are doing. Scan my boarding pass again. Let me get on the plane I am ticketed for. We can all forget this unfortunate interaction ever happened." It was a lifeline, a chance for her to de-escalate, to pull back from the cliff's edge she was so determined to leap from. It was more grace than she deserved. But Brenda didn't see a lifeline. She saw weakness. She saw him pleading. And it empowered her. The thrill of holding absolute power over this calm, intelligent man who she felt looked down on her was intoxicating. She laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Reconsider. Sir, the decision is final. You are denied boarding. I can have airport security escort you from the gate if you continue to argue." She turned to Leo. "Close the flight, Leo. We're done here." Leo hesitated, glancing from his superior's triumphant, flushed face to Dr. Vance's impassive one. "Brenda, maybe we should just call David." "I said close the flight," she barked. With trembling hands, Leo typed a command into his terminal. The screen flashed the message. "Gate closed." Brenda turned back to Dr. Vance with a smug, dismissive smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a plane to dispatch." She turned and started walking down the jet bridge, expecting him to be left behind, defeated and humiliated. But Elias didn't move. He simply watched her go. He then looked at the massive airplane visible through the terminal windows, the Global Air logo gleaming on its tail. He took a slow, deliberate breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It wasn't to call a manager. It wasn't to complain to customer service. It was far, far past that now. He scrolled through his contacts to a name listed simply as Marcus Thorne. He pressed the call button. The line was picked up before the first ring had even finished. "Elias," a voice boomed on the other end. "Don't tell me you're backing out of dinner Thursday." "I may have to postpone, Marcus," Elias said, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "I'm at JFK, gate C-26. "Ah, heading to the summit. Good. How are things?" "That's what I'm calling about," Elias said, his eyes fixed on the Boeing 747. "There appears to be a significant ground crew compliance and safety protocol failure here. It's regarding Global Air Flight 101. There was a pause on the other end. The jovial tone was gone, replaced by sharp-edged concern. "What kind of failure? A maintenance issue?" "A personnel issue," Elias clarified. "The lead gate agent has demonstrated a profound inability to follow standard verification protocols. She has become erratic. Based on my direct observation of her behavior, I can no longer trust that the required pre-flight crew collaboration and security checks have been performed to ethereal standards." He chose his words with the precision of a surgeon. Erratic. Compliance failure. Security checks. Ethereal standards. These were not the words of a disgruntled passenger. They were the coded language of catastrophic liability. "Elias, what are you saying?" Marcus asked, his voice now grim. "I'm saying," Dr. Vance replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the force of a thunderclap, that as the lead architect of the Ethereal 7 operating system that manages the flight controls of that aircraft, I am officially withdrawing my safety certification for this flight. I recommend you issue an immediate operational hold, not just on this aircraft, on the entire Global Air 777 fleet, call sign GA101, effective immediately. Ground them all until we can figure out what is going on with this airline's staff. Silence stretched across the line for 3 long seconds. In the world of global aviation, 3 seconds is an eternity. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a friend Elias was supposed to have dinner with. He was the chief executive officer of Ethereal Avionics, the multi-billion-dollar corporation that designed and supplied the proprietary software and hardware that ran nearly every critical system on Global Air's modern fleet, from flight controls and navigation to engine management. An operational hold, recommended by Dr. Elias Vance, wasn't a suggestion. It was a kill switch. His name was on the patents. His team's signature was on the safety certifications that the FAA and its European counterpart, the EASA, required for the planes to even be insured, let alone fly. His word was bond, because his word was liability. If he, the system's chief architect, declared he had no confidence in the safety protocols surrounding one of his planes, no pilot would fly it, no insurer would cover it, and no sane CEO would let it leave the ground. Elias, are you certain? Marcus's voice was stripped of all pleasantries. It was the voice of a CEO staring down the barrel of a logistical and financial nightmare. I am standing at the gate she just denied me boarding from, Marcus, Elias stated flatly. I gave her every chance. The failure in judgment is so absolute that it calls into question the entire operational integrity at this station. I cannot and will not attach my name to it. The hold is necessary. Understood, Marcus said. The decision was made. The chain of events was now in motion, an avalanche starting with a single, quiet phone call. I'm patching in my ops director and legal team. Stay on the line. Where are you now? Still at gate C26? Elias replied, watching through the window as Brenda Jenkins reappeared at the end of the jet bridge, giving the ground crew a thumbs up. She was smiling, triumphant. The world inside the terminal continued as normal for another 90 seconds. Passengers from other flights milled about. The cleaning crew began tidying the seating area at gate C26. Elias stood by the window, phone to his ear, a silent observer of a drama whose climax was still invisible to everyone but him. Then, the first visible ripple. Inside the cockpit of Global Air 101, Captain Frank Miller was going through his final pre-flight checklist. The jet bridge had just pulled back. He was about to request permission to push back from the gate. Suddenly, his ECARS printer, the little machine that spits out text messages from the airline, whirred to life. He tore off the message. His eyes widened. MSG from GA, OPS Control. Rat Flight GA Wasasan Wasa 1, JFK LHR. Immediate hold. Do not proceed with pushback. All engine startup prohibited. Await further instructions. Acknowledge. Simultaneously, a high-priority message flashed on the screen of the ground operations manager in the control tower. His radio crackled. Tower to Global 101. Hold your position. I repeat, hold your position. Gate C26 is now inactive. Back at the gate, Brenda Jenkins was tidying her podium, basking in the glow of her victory. She had put that arrogant man in his place. She had protected the sanctity of her flight. She was about to log off her terminal when a jarring, high-priority alert flashed across her screen, overriding everything else. The text was in bold, angry red letters. Flight Gay 101. JFK, grounded by executive order. Do not close gate. All operations cease immediately. Await station manager. Brenda stared at the screen, her smug smile dissolving into a mask of pure confusion. Grounded? What? We're already pushed. She looked out the window. The plane was still attached to the jet bridge, which was now, inexplicably, moving back towards the aircraft door. The ground crew, who had been waving their orange batons, now stood looking around in bewilderment. Her headset crackled. It was the pilot, Captain Miller. His voice was not happy. "Gate C-26, this is Captain Miller. What in God's name is going on? My console is lit up like a Christmas tree, with a fleet-wide operational hold. Ops is telling me the flight is grounded. Did someone call in a bomb threat?" No, Captain," Brenda stammered, her mind racing. I don't know. Everything was fine." But it wasn't fine. Her screen began to flash with more messages. Not just for her flight. Flights in Chicago, in Dallas, in Los Angeles. Any Global Air 777 being prepped for departure under that specific call sign was being hit with the same order. A system-wide targeted shutdown. The financial bleeding for the airline had just begun, and it was hemorrhaging millions by the minute. Passengers on the plane, who had been settling in, began to murmur as the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, this is your captain speaking. We've been instructed to hold our position at the gate due to an unforeseen issue with our ground verification. We don't have any more information at this time, but we'll let you know as soon as we do." The collective groan in the cabin was audible even through the thick terminal glass. Brenda's world was tilting on its axis. This was impossible. It had to be a system error, a massive computer failure. It couldn't have anything to do with the man she had just kicked off the flight. That was absurd. And then she saw him. Dr. Elias Vance was still standing by the window, phone to his ear, calm as a statue. He was watching the chaos he had unleashed with a look of profound, weary gravity. Their eyes met through the reflection in the glass. In that instant, Brenda Jenkins felt a cold dread creep up her spine, a primal fear that she had just made a mistake of such colossal proportions that she couldn't even begin to comprehend its scale. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the concourse. David Chen, the JFK station manager for Global Air, was sprinting towards the gate, his tie askew and his face pale with panic. His eyes scanned the scene, the frozen jet bridge, the confused ground crew, the flashing red alerts on the monitors. He didn't look at Brenda. His eyes locked onto the one person standing still in the middle of the storm, the tall, composed black man in the grey hoodie. David Chen was a man who lived with a baseline level of professional anxiety. As the station manager for a major airline at one of the world's busiest airports, his job was a constant, high-stakes game of whack-a-mole, dealing with everything from weather delays to mechanical issues to VIP tantrums. But in his 12 years in the role, he had never received a call like the one he just took. It wasn't from his direct supervisor. It was from Robert Strickland, the Executive Vice President of North American Operations for Global Air, calling from the corporate headquarters in Chicago. And Strickland hadn't sounded angry. He had sounded terrified. "David," Strickland had said, his voice tight with panic, "what the hell is happening at Gate C-26? Marcus Thorne from Ethereal Avionics just personally called our CEO. He's initiated a fleet-wide operational hold. He's threatening to revoke the service certification for our entire 777 fleet. He said it's because of a critical personnel failure at your station. Do you have any idea the chaos this is causing? Fix it. Fix it now." Strickland didn't need to explain the implications. Ethereal revoking their certification would be an extinction-level event for the airline. It would ground their most profitable international routes indefinitely. It was unthinkable. So when David Chen arrived at Gate C-26, breathless and sweating, he wasn't looking for an employee to reprimand. He was looking for the cause of a corporate catastrophe. His eyes landed on Dr. Vance, who was now ending his call. The man's expensive, understated attire and air of unshakable authority screamed, "Important." Ignoring a stammering Brenda, David walked straight up to Dr. Vance. "Sir," he said, his voice strained but respectful. "I'm David Chen, the station manager. I understand there has been a problem here." Dr. Vance nodded slowly, his gaze clinical, as if studying a specimen. "Mr. Chen." "Yes, there has been a problem. My superiors have been contacted by Ethereal Avionics," David continued, lowering his voice. "They're talking about grounding the fleet. Sir, can you please tell me what happened?" Before Elias could answer, Brenda, seeing her manager talking deferentially to the man she had just dismissed, rushed over. The reality of her situation was beginning to dawn on her, and panic was overriding her judgment. "David, thank God you're here," she interjected, pointing a trembling finger at Elias. "This man, his ticket was flagged, and he became very aggressive. He refused to cooperate with security protocols. I denied him boarding for the safety of the flight, and now he's making some kind of threat." David Chen stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked back at Dr. Vance, who hadn't flinched. Elias simply watched Brenda, a flicker of pity in his eyes. He gave her enough rope, and she had fashioned it into a noose. "Is that what happened, sir?" David asked Elias, his voice laced with dread. "No, Mr. Chen, that is not what happened," Elias said calmly. "What happened is that your lead agent, Ms. Jenkins, profiled me the moment she saw me. She ignored a simple system flag that could have been cleared in 10 seconds and instead launched into an baseless interrogation about my finances and my profession. She made unsubstantiated accusations of fraud. When I calmly corrected her and asked her to do her job, she accused me of having an attitude. And when I gave her a final opportunity to rectify her mistake, she laughed in my face and barred me from the flight, citing a non-existent security risk." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The only security risk at this gate, Mr. Chen, is an employee who is so blinded by her own prejudice that she is incapable of performing her duties competently. My call to my CEO was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. The operational integrity of this flight was compromised by your ground staff. Therefore, as the person ultimately responsible for the software that keeps that plane in the air, I could not, in good conscience, certify its safety." Every word was a nail in Brenda's professional coffin. David Chen looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. He finally understood. This wasn't a disgruntled passenger. This was the source. This was the man Marcus Thorne had called a critical personnel failure about. He turned to Brenda, his voice dropping to a low, furious whisper. "Brenda, who is this man?" Brenda's face had gone white as a sheet. "His name. His passport says Elias Vance. He said he was some kind of architect." David closed his eyes, a pained expression on his face. He looked like he was mourning the death of his career. "Brenda," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. "This is Dr. Elias Vance. He isn't some kind of architect. He is the lead systems architect for Ethereal Avionics. The name of his company is written on half the processors in that cockpit. The operating system that manages the flight controls, the navigation, the very thing that stops that $300 million plane from falling out of the sky. It's called the Ethereal 7. Dr. Vance is the Vance in the patent office. He is Ethereal 7. He didn't just buy a first-class ticket, Brenda. Our airline, along with a dozen others, probably paid for his entire house." The scale of her blunder finally crashed down upon Brenda Jenkins with the force of a physical blow. Her knees felt weak. The sounds of the terminal faded into a dull roar in her ears. She looked at Dr. Vance, truly seeing him for the first time. She didn't see a threat or a problem passenger anymore. She saw a man of immense, quiet power. Power she had mistaken for arrogance and prodded until it had broken her entire world. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. I didn't know." "That, Miss Jenkins," Dr. Vance said, his voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a deep, resonant sadness, "is precisely the problem. You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. You just saw what you wanted to see." David Chen took out his radio. "This is Chen to operations. Get me security at gate C26, and get me a relief agent. Miss Jenkins is being relieved of her duties, effective immediately." He looked at Brenda, his face cold stone. "Hand me your badge and your credentials. You're suspended, pending a full investigation." Brenda stared at him, tears welling in her eyes as she fumbled to unclip the ID badge she had worn with pride for over 2 decades. Her little kingdom at the boarding gate had crumbled to dust, and the man she had tried to humiliate was now deciding the fate of the entire airline. The arrival of 2 uniformed Port Authority officers and a grim-faced Global Air corporate security official signaled the end of the public spectacle and the beginning of the quiet, brutal mechanics of corporate damage control. The passengers on Flight 101 were instructed to deplane, a process met with a chorus of groans and angry shouts. The flight was officially, indefinitely delayed. The airline would later cite unexpected operational issues. Brenda Jenkins was not led away in handcuffs. It was a far more humiliating process. She was escorted, pale and trembling, to a small, windowless office deep within the terminal's administrative wing. David Chen and the corporate security official, a stoic man named Peterson, sat opposite her at a metal table. A digital voice recorder was placed between them. The investigation was swift and merciless. Peterson was not interested in her feelings or her bad day. He was interested in facts and liability. "Ms. Jenkins," Peterson began, his voice flat. "Can you explain to me why you overrode the standard procedure for a ticket flag? Our records show the flag was a simple code SD4, indicating a seat duplication error, likely because the passenger was upgraded at check-in. The protocol is to reissue the boarding pass. The entire process should have taken 30 seconds. Why did you initiate a fraud inquiry?" Brenda couldn't answer. What could she say? "Because he was a black man in a hoodie, and I assumed he couldn't afford the ticket." Admitting her prejudice felt like a confession of a crime, but denying it was impossible. Her every action had been documented by the gate's CCTV cameras. I thought I saw a warning for something else," she lied, her voice cracking. "I was just trying to be thorough." "Thorough?" Peterson countered, sliding a printout across the table. "This is a transcript of all passenger complaints filed against you in the last 18 months. There are 7. 4 of them cite unprofessional and accusatory questioning. 2 use the specific term racial profiling. All 7 complaints were filed by non-white passengers. Do you see a pattern here, Ms. Jenkins?" She stared at the paper, her history of petty abuses and microaggressions laid bare in sterile corporate font. The times she had randomly selected a person of color for an extra baggage check. The security questions she had directed at a man with a Middle Eastern name. The condescending tone she had used with a young Asian woman who had asked a simple question. Until now they had been minor incidents, brushed aside by middle management. But now, under the high-powered microscope of a multi-million-dollar corporate crisis, they formed a damning mosaic of bigotry. "Those were misunderstandings," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. They were difficult passengers. David Chen, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice heavy with contempt. The most valuable business partner our airline has, a man whose technology we rely on for our very existence, is not a difficult passenger, Brenda. You didn't have a misunderstanding. You had a power trip, and it's going to cost this airline a fortune. Lost revenue, delay compensation for over 300 passengers, potential contract renegotiations with Ethereal. The damage is incalculable. Her suspension was a formality. Her career at Global Air was over. By the end of the day, her system access would be revoked, her locker would be emptied, and a termination letter would be drafted by the legal department. The airline would make her the sacrificial lamb to appease Ethereal Avionics, a clear signal that they were dealing with the personnel issue decisively. Meanwhile, Dr. Elias Vance was in the Polaris first-class lounge, which had been cleared out for his private use. He sat not in triumph, but in quiet contemplation, sipping a bottle of water. Robert Strickland, the EVP of Operations, was on a conference call with him, his voice a torrent of profuse, borderline fawning apologies. And Dr. Vance, I want to personally assure you that we are taking this with the utmost seriousness. The employee in question has been suspended, and her termination is being expedited. We are launching a root and branch review of our sensitivity and bias training, starting at JFK and rolling it out nationwide. This is not who we are as an airline. Elias listened patiently. I appreciate that, Robert, he finally said, his voice calm. But this was never about just one employee. Ms. Jenkins is a symptom of a larger disease. She felt empowered to act the way she did because the corporate culture allowed it. The other passengers saw it happening. The other employee saw it happening. And nobody stopped her. That's the problem you need to fix. Absolutely, Doctor. We will. We're committed to it, Strickland promised. Now, about the operational hold. We have a new crew and a new lead agent at the gate. We've run a full diagnostic. We are prepared to get you on your way to London as soon as you give the word. Elias thought for a moment. He could have pushed. He could have demanded more, let the airline bleed for a few more hours. But that wasn't his goal. He hadn't acted out of revenge. He had acted to enforce a standard. All right, Robert, he said. Lift the hold, but my team will be in touch. We're going to be auditing your ground crew training protocols for the next 6 months. Ethereal's certification will now be contingent on passing those audits. He had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a systemic, enforceable change. It was a far more potent and lasting victory than simply getting one woman fired. Of course, Dr. Vance. Whatever you need, Strickland said, relief washing through his voice. 3 hours after its scheduled departure, Global Air Flight 101 finally pushed back from Gate C-26. Dr. Elias Vance was in Seat 2A. As the plane taxied to the runway, every single member of the flight crew, from the captain down to the newest flight attendant, made a point of stopping by his seat to personally apologize for the delay and thank him for his patience. They all knew who he was now. They all knew what had happened. The power dynamic had been irrevocably and justly reversed. The fallout from the incident at Gate C-26 did not end with a simple termination notice. It was not a clean break, but a slow, grinding unraveling. Karma in the real world is rarely a lightning bolt. More often, it is a rising tide of consequences, swamping the foundations of a life built on flawed ground. For Brenda Jenkins, the tide came in with a devastating, silent force. Her escort from the gate was the first wave. It was not the public perp walk she might have feared, but something far more chilling in its quiet efficiency. Flanked by the impassive corporate security official, Peterson, and her now former boss, David Chen, she was led through a labyrinth of sterile, beige corridors marked "Staff Only." The vibrant chaos of the terminal faded behind them, replaced by the hum of ventilation systems and the squeak of their shoes on polished linoleum. No one spoke a word. The silence was an indictment. Her keycard had already been deactivated. Peterson had to swipe his own to get through each door, a small but profound symbol of how swiftly she had been excised from the system. The interview took place in a windowless room furnished with a metal table and 4 chairs. It was less an investigation and more of an autopsy of her career. Peterson laid out the facts with the dispassionate air of a coroner. He played the CCTV footage on a laptop, the video silent, which somehow made it worse. He showed her dismissive wave, the condescending lean over the podium, the smug smile as she walked away from Dr. Vance. He pointed to the time-stamped logs from her computer. 1642-03, Peterson stated, his voice flat. System flags ticket. Code SD4. Seat duplication. Standard procedure is a 30-second reissue. He paused, letting the information hang in the air. You spent the next 11 minutes and 47 seconds engaged in an unsanctioned, non-procedural interrogation. Why, Ms. Jenkins? I had a feeling something was wrong, she mumbled, her eyes fixed on the table. I was concerned about security. Whose security? Peterson countered, his voice cutting through her weak defense. The airlines, or your own comfort level with a passenger who didn't fit your preconceived notion of first class? He slid a file across the table. It was her employee record, flagged with printouts of the previous complaints against her. This wasn't an anomaly, was it, Brenda? It was a pattern. You just finally picked the wrong person to practice it on. The meeting ended with her signing a document, acknowledging her immediate suspension. As she pushed her signed confession across the table, she finally broke. This isn't fair, she sobbed. 22 years. I gave this company 22 years of my life. David Chen, who had been watching with a look of exhausted disgust, finally spoke. And in 10 minutes, you managed to cause more damage to it than a Category 4 hurricane. Don't talk to me about fairness. Her termination was confirmed by email 2 days later. Her lawyer, a man whose billboard promised aggressive representation, met with her once. After his first call with Global Air's legal department, during which they offered to share Brenda's complete file and the unedited security footage, he called her back. His tone had changed from confident bluster to weary advice. "Brenda, listen to me," he said. "There's no case here. They have you dead to rights. If you sue, they will counter-sue for damages, and they will win. Your best move is to sign the non-disclosure agreement, take the final paycheck, and walk away. Quietly." Walking away quietly meant stepping into a void. Brenda Jenkins wasn't just a person. She was a lead gate agent. Her identity was woven into the uniform, the authority, the sense of being a vital cog in a massive, glamorous machine. Without it, she was adrift. She applied to every other major airline. Delta, United, American, even international carriers like British Airways and Lufthansa. Most applications vanished into a digital black hole. A few granted her a preliminary phone screening. But the moment the question, "Are you eligible for rehire at your previous employer?" came up, the conversation would turn chilly and end abruptly. The industry had closed ranks. She was toxic. After 4 months of dwindling savings and mounting dread, she took the only job she could get that offered a steady paycheck, a customer service agent at a budget rental car company, located in a dreary lot a mile from the airport. Her new uniform was a cheap polyester polo shirt that was perpetually staticky. Her new kingdom was a small plexiglass booth that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Her days were now a parade of indignities. She argued with tourists over insurance waivers and fuel charges. She was yelled at for cars not being clean enough. She processed payments, handed over keys, and pointed people towards a row of identical, dented sedans. And from her booth, through the chain-link fence, she had a perfect, heartbreaking view of the JFK runways. She would watch the sleek, powerful forms of Boeing 777s, their tails painted with the familiar Global Air logo, ascend into the sky. Each one was a monument to her failure, a symbol of the world she had been ejected from, a world where she had once held the power to say no. Now, her only power was asking, "Would you like to upgrade to a mid-size for just $12.99 a day?" The hard karma wasn't just losing her job. It was being forced to witness, every single day, the life she had thrown away. For Global Air, the reckoning was less personal, but far more expensive. An emergency board meeting was convened in Chicago. The presentation slide, titled JFK C-26 Incident, Financial Impact Analysis, was brutal. The 3-hour grounding had cascaded through their network, causing 17 connecting flights to be missed and delayed a further 28. The immediate cost in compensation vouchers, hotel rooms, meal stipends, crew overtime, and wasted fuel topped $4.5 million, but that was a pittance compared to the long-term damage. The first audit meeting with Ethereal Avionics was a bloodbath. Dr. Vance did not attend. Instead, he sent his chief compliance officer, a woman named Maria Flores, who had the cheerful demeanor of a shark. She didn't want apologies. She wanted control. The new Ethereal Standards Addendum to their service contract was non-negotiable. It gave Ethereal auditors unprecedented access to Global Air's training materials, employee complaint logs, and hiring practices. It mandated a complete overhaul of their customer service training to be designed by an Ethereal-approved consulting firm. The cost of this new program, which would be rolled out to all 20,000 of Global Air's customer-facing employees, was estimated at $15 million. Global Air had no choice but to agree. Robert Strickland signed the document, feeling less like an EVP and more like a parolee, accepting his terms of release. The new training program, ironically named the Global Standard, was met with internal resistance. Veteran employees grumbled about sensitivity nonsense and having to attend role-playing workshops on unconscious bias. But the message from the top was unequivocal: comply or be replaced. David Chen's fate served as a stark warning. His transfer to Omaha was a public execution of his career, a signal that management would be held accountable for the failures of their staff. He sold his home on Long Island at a loss and moved his resentful family to a place they had only ever flown over. The collateral damage of Brenda's 10 minutes of prejudice spread far and wide. Dr. Elias Vance, the man at the center of the storm, moved on with his life. He flew to London, delivered the keynote address that secured the final phase of his project, and worked with his team to ensure a seamless integration. He never mentioned the incident at JFK. When a colleague gingerly asked about the rumors of a big shutdown, Elias simply replied, "We identified a flaw in a safety protocol and corrected it." For him, it truly was that simple. Brenda Jenkins was not the problem. She was a variable in a faulty equation. The goal was to fix the equation. He personally designed the metrics for the Ethereal audit. On a video call with Maria Flores and his team, he was clear. "I don't want a witch hunt," he instructed. "I want data. We will track complaint statistics filtered by passenger demographics. We will monitor gate-side delay times correlated with the lead agent on duty. We will develop a system that flags employees who exhibit a pattern of random security checks, disproportionately targeting minorities. We will use technology and process to engineer bias out of the system where we can. This is a systems problem. We will apply a systems solution. 6 months later, he was flying through JFK once more. The terminal looked the same, but something felt different. At the Global Air gates, new posters were displayed, outlining a passenger bill of rights. As he approached his own gate, he saw the lead agent, a young man with a kind face, patiently explaining to an elderly woman how to stow her medical device. He handled the interaction with grace and respect. When it was Elias's turn, the agent scanned his pass. It chimed cheerfully. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Vance," the agent said with a genuine smile. "Looks like you're in 2A. Have a wonderful flight to San Francisco." There was no hesitation, no suspicion, no sideways glance. Just simple, professional courtesy. It was unremarkable, and in its unremarkableness, it was a profound victory. Elias nodded his thanks and walked down the jet bridge. He hadn't just gotten one woman fired. He had forced a behemoth of a corporation to re-examine its soul. He had implemented a change that would benefit thousands of travelers, people he would never meet. He took his seat, pulled out his tablet, and began to work. The plane took off, rising smoothly into the clear blue sky, flying safer and fairer than it had 6 months before. The karma was not in Brenda Jenkins's fall, but in this quiet, undeniable ascent. What started with a single, discriminatory no ended with a systemic, industry-changing yes. Yes to respect, yes to accountability, and yes to the fact that prejudice, in any form, carries a price. Dr. Elias Vance didn't seek revenge. He sought responsibility. He used his unique position not just to clear his own path, but to pave a smoother one for everyone who might come after him. This story is a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate could be the one holding the keys to the entire system. It shows that true power isn't about raising your voice, but about knowing exactly who to call and what to say. If this story of hard-hitting karma and quiet justice resonated with you, let us know in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's prejudice spectacularly backfired? We want to hear your stories. Please hit that like button if you found this compelling, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.